Hello, and welcome everyone to today's cloud coaching session on leveraging low-code development capabilities and implementing textual analysis in Apex. My name is Tara Van Cleve, and I'm a marketing event manager for the developer initiative here at Oracle. We're excited to show you how to get started with Oracle Apex and to explore dynamic reporting. If you do not currently have an Oracle Cloud account, we've got a special promotion in the chat so that you can try out OCI services yourself. If you have any questions during the webcast, please ask them in the Slack channel and we'll answer them throughout the session. The link to join is bit.ly/slack/join-devrel. Once you're in, you'll land in the general channel, and from there we can search for North America Cloud Coaching to reach our dedicated space for Q&A today. Today's webcast will be presented by Shane Jayawardene, Staff Cloud Engineer for Oracle Apex, and Allison Visconti, Program Manager for Virtual Code Innovate. Special thanks to Zach Curtis, Staff Cloud Engineer for Oracle Apex, who will be helping out with questions today. So without further ado, I will pass it over to Shane.
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's cloud coaching session, where we're going to be leveraging low-code development inside of Apex. And I'm going to show you how to use some of Oracle database features, such as Oracle Text, in order to do some advanced textual analysis on either PDF or Word documents that you might have a customer or a user upload into your database. So the agenda for today is pretty simple. We're going to start with an Apex overview, where we talk about some of the basics of Oracle Apex, as well as what you'd like to use Oracle Apex for yourself. We'll talk about a use case discussion and architecture, and we'll cover some of the use cases that commonly come to us from our customers where they would like to use Apex in their own businesses, as well as today's use case discussion, which we're going to take a slightly different route using Oracle Text. We're then going to go ahead and jump into a live demo. In the live demo, I'm going to start from scratch, and I'm going to basically walk you through how you could create a very similar application in your own environment. We'll walk through which components control which features of your new Oracle Apex application, as well as walk through the SQL workshop, where we'll discuss some of the Oracle Text features and how we can implement that into our new Apex application. I'm then going to go ahead and pass it to Ali, who will talk about our Code Innovate program, where we'll learn how we could use a similar use case that you would bring to our team, and we can discuss building out your use case to solve a problem within your business. And finally, we'll wrap up with just a Q&A. So let's go ahead and get started. What exactly is Oracle Apex? So Oracle Apex is a low-code tool that's going to allow you to rapidly build out applications and solve problems within your individual business. It allows you to build applications roughly 38 times faster when using about 20 times the amount of code. It's used to build desktop mobile applications for your Oracle database. Oracle Apex allows you to design, develop, and deploy beautifully responsive database-driven applications, either on-premise or in the cloud. You can quickly build out reports, forms, charts, as well as other reporting tools for your business on top of the data that already exists within your database. You don't necessarily need to be an application developer or know how to code to be able to work with Oracle Apex, and I think that's the beauty behind it. Whether you're an IT developer or a citizen developer or just a general business user, even with little to no SQL knowledge, you're able to readily build out some of the applications inside of Oracle Apex. Apex also takes advantage of a large majority of the Oracle database features. So one of those features is Oracle Text, which is the one we're going to be covering today for our deep dive. Simply, you're able to use a web browser and a URL to access the development environment, or you can use a URL and some web credentials to access the runtime environment for your end users. You don't need any client software installed on your local machine to be able to access Oracle Apex, and it all runs on a declarative framework, which stores the application definitions inside of the Oracle database tables within the Apex engine. So there's no need for some file-based compilation or code generation. All the data page processing is performed by PL SQL, which acts directly on data schemas inside your database. And therefore, it allows you to basically manipulate the data in the database and send the results very quickly back as just an HTML page to your end user. I also wanted to share with you some of the common use cases that come up inside of either Code Innovate or from our customers and what they're looking to Apex to solve their individual problems. Probably one of the more common use cases is moving from, I should say, an Excel spreadsheet or a spreadsheet similar to that into an application for their business. So Apex allows you to easily transform a simple spreadsheet into a web application, and then you can allow your end users to access that web application with just a simple URL. It allows you to move to a single source of truth instead of moving Excel spreadsheets or CSV spreadsheets around within your business. It's scalable, it's secure. You can use role-based access and validations to ensure that the correct users are seeing the right amount of data, or you're validating the data that an end user is inputting into your database. You can also extend your analytics within Apex with some charts and reportings and calendars and other features that are really easy to build out using the Apex wizard. Now, for today's use case, it's a little different. Today, we're going to be using a Apex application that I'm going to build out, and we're going to be basically uploading some PDF documents like you see here in the bottom left. I'm going to give you a better look at some of them in just a minute here. And we're going to build an Apex application that allows you to insert via the browser that PDF document into the Oracle database. Then what we're going to do is use Oracle text to allow us to filter, search, query inside of the PDF documents, looking for special key terms or keywords inside the documents to allow our end users to better get visibility into what that document contains. So the application flow would look something like this. The user would log into the application from an end user's perspective. They would execute a query where they're searching for a certain keyword within all documents inside of that database. The application is then going to execute the query, present the hit list back to the end user, and when the user selects the document from the hit list, they're then presented that document for viewing. So viewing in this case can mean a lot of things. I think for this application, we can have the users either download the PDF document directly from the database to their local machine to be able to view it. What we can also do is we can allow them to click maybe an extra button to generate a theme selection of that document to get a generalized idea of what the document contains and the themes inside of it. We can also show them how to generate maybe gist inside of the document to get a gist of that document before actually viewing the full text of the document. In the future, of course, you could also take this even one step further. You can implement some JavaScript to show a PDF viewer inside of your application. So without having to download the document directly to your local machine, we could display the document inside of the Apex application UI itself. So let's go ahead and get started with our live demo. Like I mentioned, before we get started, I wanted to give you the chance to look at some of our sample PDF documents. These sample documents contain data and information about a recent patient visit to a healthcare facility. It talks about some of the medications that were recommended to the patient, some of the next steps, as well as some vitals for the patient's visit of that certain day. It also talks about some of the attached information as well as instructions directly from their doctor that saw them on that particular day. So there's about 6 documents, and each of them contains a little bit of different information as far as medication, review from the doctor, and next steps. And so we're going to use those keywords to be able to search for different key components within each of these documents once we have them uploaded into our database. Moving over to Apex, you'll see here that this is the Apex workspace that you would see when you first log in and create your own workspace. Apex works off of 4 basic tiles. So those 4 tiles are your app builder, your SQL workshop, your team development, and your gallery. For today's demonstration, we're going to go ahead and focus mainly on the app builder and the SQL workshop. Inside of team development, you're going to be able to find information regarding organization of your developers within a certain workspace. So whether that is creating tasks, assigning tasks, creating priority, as well as many more within the team development. You can also find a section where you can organize feedback directly from your end users and assign it to certain developers inside your workspace. And that feedback option is a one-click feature that you'll see when we create our application here in just a minute. Now, inside the gallery, you're going to find a lot of sample and starter applications that will allow you to organize and explore a lot of the Oracle Apex features. So each of these applications can be installed with just one click into your Apex environments. It will allow you to look at the UI, how things are built, as well as the backend, so you can really dive deep into some of these applications, and each one that covers a different topic. There's also starter apps, which goes into more applications that are ready to go out of the box and can be used for your business right away. So let's go ahead and return to the home screen, and we're going to take a look at the SQL workshop and inside the object browser. We're going to look at some of the database objects that already exist within our database currently. So as you can see here on the left-hand side, we have a list of all the tables within my database. And if we click this drop-down, you'll see a list of all the other objects within the database too. The tables we're going to be focusing on today are these patient tables with patient lab, patient document, patient insurance. But the main table we need to look at is this patient documents table. The patient documents table contains 4 records of PDF documents of recent visits to a healthcare facility. As you noted before, we do have a total of 6 documents. So the first step after we go ahead and create our application is to go ahead and upload our remaining 2 documents, so we're able to query all documents at the same time. In order to get started, we first want to create our base application. So for me, what I want to do is create an application based on this healthcare facility table. You can see the table structure of this healthcare facility table, as well as some of the data inside of it right here. And to create an application based on this table, we can go ahead and just say create application and create app one more time. Here you'll get an outline of the application that you're about to create, so nothing's been created just yet. And you can change certain components or elements of that new application directly here before it's created. So for example, we can change the name to just Oracle Text. What you can also do is tweak the appearance. So if we want to go with a different theme style and maybe choose the navigation as a side menu, you can use that. I will note all the changes that I'm making currently in the outline of this Apex application are completely changeable later as well. So anything you choose now can be edited or deleted later. And so if you knew what pages you want, you could also go ahead and add the pages directly here. And likewise, if you didn't want one of these pages that come out of the box, you can always choose the edit button and just choose the delete option. So now you have gotten rid of the dashboard. Under the features, each one does a little bit of a different feature for your new application. I'm going to go ahead and create the application. I'll talk about some of the important ones. For example, probably the most important key components of some of the applications that I build out is the application access control. We use this in Apex to control role-based access within your new application, so you can control which user has access to what data inside of your Apex application. So you can limit a user's access to either pages, complete reports, partial reports, creating or update or deleting buttons, things like that. So now that we have our application created, let's just take a quick second to go ahead and run this application and look at what this new application looks like. You're initially greeted by a home page, which will give you hyperlinks to the different pages within your application, but you can also access them through this hamburger menu right here. If we look at the first of the 2 reports that was created, this is just going to be a simple classic report where it displays the data from that healthcare facility table that we looked at, but it also has paired it with a faceted search here on the left-hand side. So the facets are certain columns within our database table that Apex has determined would be most beneficial to filter on. So the easiest thing for you to do is to come in here and quickly choose one of these facets, and you'll see that it starts to filter down the table directly on the right in real time. What you can also do is quickly show a chart here. Let's say we show one based on country code, and you can continue to filter, and you'll see that the chart is updated in real time. Now, all these facets on the left-hand side were automatically generated by Apex when we created our application. I haven't gone in and configured anything for this application specifically. But in the future, if you want to come in here and change the facets on the left-hand side, update, delete some of them, create new facets, you can do that within the page designer, which I'll show you as well. If we look at the second of the 2 reports in here, we can go ahead and see that this is a interact report, as denoted by the form here on the left-hand side, as well as the actions tab up here. Interactive reports power really comes from the features that are stored within the actions tab. So within the actions tab, there's many options to get rid of columns, filter your data, update your data, and format it to your own personal needs. And This report is completely customizable on a user by user basis. So each user can come here, select the data that's most meaningful for them. Maybe that's a pivot or creating a chart. And then they can go ahead and save the report right here under report in order to save it so that next time they log into this application, the database table is automatically filtered and formatted to their liking. So unlike a classic report where we weren't going to be able to edit directly onto the report itself, here in the interactive report, we want to just click this little pencil icon here on the left-hand side, and now pull up the individual row ID for that record, and you can make any changes here. So if you want to change the country code from 45 to 50, for example, and say apply changes, you'll see it take place directly on this table and report, but also inside the database itself. One thing to note here about security is, like I mentioned, with role-based access, you can easily limit which users are able to access these features. So you can choose if a user is able to edit this report or even create a new record, and those aren't dependent on each other. You can allow a user to edit the report but not create a new record, or create a new record but not edit the report. And the granularity goes as deep as you'd like it to go. So if you'd like them to be able to edit every field within this table except for the address, for example, you could also do that just based on the user that's logged in. And that's all done through application access control settings. So like I mentioned, the first step now we have to take is to make sure that we can get our last two records inserted into our patient documents table. And in order to do that, I'm actually going to create one more new page that's going to allow us to view the patient documents table as a report and allow us to insert new records into that table. So I'm going to go ahead here. I'm going to choose a classic report. And for the classic report, I'm going to give it a quick name. And I'm going to say include form page. The form page is going to allow us to update, delete, and edit records just like you saw previously in an interactive report. And I'll give the form page a name as well. Finally, down here, it's going to ask you for what your table or source is for this report. So if we just search for our patient documents table, choose that and say next. It's going to go through here. It's going to load the report and start creating the page. It's also going to go ahead and ask you for what the primary key is on this certain report. In this case, the primary key is ID, so you don't need to edit it. But if you did want to add a composite key, you could do so right below. And we'll say create page one more time. So this is the page that was created. Here you can see our reports and the query that's pulling directly from our database table. We can go ahead and move this to a new line so we can see what's going on here. I'll also note that you have your report that's created on page 5, but you also have the form that was created on page 6. So I'll show you page 6. It's a very similar looking page, except that instead of these being referred to as database columns, they're simply page items that will store a user's input and use the page processing found right here to insert those user inputs directly into the database table using automatic row processing right here. Let's go ahead and actually take a look at what this report looks like. Again, we just followed the wizard and clicked on 2 separate buttons and selected table, and now you can see what our report looks like. You'll also see it created a new tab here in our navigation menu. So let's go ahead and edit a few features of our patient documents table in order to make sure that we're uploading and organizing the right documents to the right columns or the right rows in the database. So the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of some of these columns. So as you can see here, there's a few columns that I don't want to display to the end user. If you say create, you'll see many more columns that end user should not be updating the record for, such as updated or created by or file name. That should all be inserted based on triggers. So to do that, we can go ahead and select the columns that we don't want to show and choose hidden and save that. For our document column, you'll see that it's a download blog column. So it allows users to download the document directly from the table. But we want to make sure that they're downloading the correct document. So it's based on primary key, but we're also going to set the MIME type column, the file name column, and the last updated column, and save that. We'll need to do something very similar for the form page that's attached to this report. And so for this one, we only really want the user to be able to input information for the patient visit ID, the title, and the document. So for the rest of these columns, we can go ahead and just select them all and hide those as well. And for the document column, we're going to go ahead and do something very similar where we associate the MIME type column, the file name column, and the last updated column, and save that. The last thing I want to do is that if we view this report one more time, you'll notice the changes have already taken place. But you'll notice the patient visit ID is a text field where we're assuming the end user is going to know the patient visit ID of the document that's being uploaded. In this case, I do have the patient visit ID tied with the document name. But to make this easier for our end users who are uploading these documents, we want to go ahead and change the input box. That's just a simple number field represented by this box right here, a number field. And we're going to go ahead and change that to a pop-up LOV. So as soon as you change to a pop-up LOV, it's going to throw an error because it's looking for a source for that list of values that you'd like to display to your end users. We can scroll down this right-hand pane and choose the list of value as a SQL query. And we'll open up the query and we can copy the code here. It's going to allow us to select the patient visit ID, concatenate it with the first name and the last name, grab the patient visit ID as the return. So all those concatenations are used as the display column, but we just want to return the patient visit ID to the database as a return option. And then from those two tables, and then we'll simply match on patient visit ID. So if we go ahead and validate that, we'll see that it's successful, and we can save that. So if we go ahead and refresh this and create, we're going to go ahead and choose our documents. So if we go into our file browse here, we can go ahead and choose our first document. And we can copy the patient visit ID. So if we just choose 651, we can confirm based on the list of values that we've generated that this is the right document. And we'll have the user enter some text describing the document themselves. And we'll just need to do that one more time. So again, we'll choose file, choose the document. This time, instead of typing the number, you can just type in the name. So just like this. Let's see, that's not going to populate. Maybe we'll need to grab the number here. So 430. Grab the number. Oh, 2 L's. So I have a spelling error there. That's why I didn't populate. So let's go ahead and document just like that and create that. So if we now go and visit the object browser one more time, and we visit our patient documents table, we'll now note that we have all 6 records inside of the database itself, as well as the 2 records specifically that we just uploaded here in the first row. And you can see the title that I assigned them here. So now let's go ahead and visit our SQL workshop where we can actually dive into working with Oracle text inside of our application. So I'm going to go into SQL workshop under SQL commands. SQL commands inside of Apex is essentially a SQL web developer browser. So anything you're doing here is acting directly on your database schemas. So when you create users or create developers in the future, you may want to have some security restrictions on who's actually allowed to access the SQL workshop, who's allowed to access the documents and objects within your table. So the first thing we need to do to employ Oracle text is to actually create an index on our patient documents table where our blobs are stored. So if you didn't catch it, once we're uploading these documents, the PDF documents, they're being stored as a blob column inside of that patient documents table. That blob column name is called documents. So what we'll do is we'll create an index called Search My Docs. And we're going to create it on the patient documents table. So on the patient documents in the document column. And we're going to go ahead, and I'll copy the rest of this here. We're going to go ahead and create the index. And the CTX is a special kind of index where we will use a data store and filter the document based on the MIME type. We also want to make sure that we are syncing this index every 60 seconds. Now, this is not a requirement, but the way this is going to work is that every time a user uploads their new document to this table, we want to make sure the index is rebuilt and most up to date in order for Oracle Text to take that index and to take that new record into account. So we can use an interval 60 seconds to refresh this index at any interval we need. And we can go ahead and say run. So once that index is created, we can then go ahead and start actually using Oracle Text. So again, we can go ahead and open this object browser in a new tab. And I'll show you that now the index can be found under this index column here. Search my docs in the patient documents table. So to begin with Oracle Text, I wanted to visit the PowerPoint one more time. So the PowerPoint is going to go through some of the Oracle Text features we're using. So in this case, we're going to be exploring some of these, maybe not all of them we won't touch on, but these are some of the most basic features of Oracle Text. So you have a basic keyword search, double keyword search, fuzzy search, maybe some of you are more familiar with the fuzzy search because it's employed in many places of Apex already. You also have a soundex search, which essentially looks for words that sound like a term or keyword that you've entered or the end user has entered. And finally, I want to explore theme extraction and gist generation. So theme extraction will allow our users to find a list of themes that are associated with the document that is uploaded into our table. And gist generation creates a gist of the text within that document and excludes a lot of the spaces, gets rid of the full text, and creates just a shorter text version of that document for easy viewing. So again, we might not touch on all these today, but the Oracle Text queries you see here are really barely scratching the surface of what Oracle Text has to offer. But we're going to cover these ones today, and I'm going to show you how you can implement them for your end user as well inside of the application. So if we go back to our Apex workspace, and we can start with the most basic one, right? So if we just do a select score, we'll grab ID, patient visit ID, we'll take the title and the created by columns. We'll get that from our table that we're talking about, so our patient documents table. And here is where we're actually using Oracle Text. We're adding a where clause, and the where clause is the contains function that's a feature of Oracle Text. So contains, and then we will use our document column and search a keyword right here. So the first one I'm going to start off with is MRN. So MRN is a reference to medical reference number. It's found in all the documents. So if we type this out properly and we run the statement, missing right parentheses, let's see here. Documents. Let me go ahead and just copy it from here just so I get rid of any spelling mistakes. And we can just use MRN right here. There you see that it's generated a query hit list of all the documents within our database. And so you can use something similar. So instead of MRN, we want to search for something that maybe not all the documents have. And since I know not all the documents have, let's say, ABC, for example, if we look up ABC, it should return only a few documents within that subset. So that you have just 2 documents containing the word ABC in it. Similarly, you can use things like journal, which should return a single record that contains that word inside of the document. But let's say we want to take it one step further, right? We don't want to simply search for one word, but we want to search for 2 or 3 words. So for a double keyword search, it's actually very similar. You would simply just write out your first word. So you can type in ABC. You can use a logical operator such as and type in the second word. So again, I know that some of these documents have the term ABC Medical Center in them. So this query should return those 2 documents. What you can also do is, instead of using and as a logical operator, just like most logical operators, you can simply change it to or. And you'll now be shown a hit list of all the records with either the word ABC or the word medical center. So I think there's one that references a different medical center in there. So we get one more record. The other one is going to be your fuzzy search. So a fuzzy search allows us to search on a word regardless of how the user typed it out or spelling mistakes or capitalizations. It's expanding the word that the user has entered into a bunch of different terms that it's aware of, and it's searching for the existence of those expanded terms inside of your documents. And I'll show you how that works. So a fuzzy search is simple like a basic search, except it's just denoted by a syntax of a single exclamation point. And then you can follow it with any text that you'd like to perform a fuzzy search on. So in this case, I can look for the word pressure with some spelling errors. And you should receive back a hit list of all the documents that contain the word pressure. So in this case, pressure is found in all documents. I think it mentions something about blood pressure within their vitals. So you'll see that it returned all the documents. Do know also in other versions of Oracle text, there are different syntaxes for fuzzy search, for soundex search, for stem word search. So for fuzzy search, for example, you can use just a simple fuzzy and then enter, I believe it is 4 separate parameters for the input text, the amount of terms you want to expand to, the weight, and I think there's one more. So just keep that in mind. There's sometimes different formats for how you can do a fuzzy search inside of Oracle text. So just like fuzzy searches, stem word searches are denoted by just a simple $sign. So in order for this to work, the word that follows, it will look through all the words inside the database that it has stemmed for Oracle Apex, and it'll return those keywords. As well as soundex search is denoted by a question mark. So you can do a soundex search for a term that sounds similar to a word that may exist in the database or inside your documents, I should say. And if you run that, you're able to find sounds that sound like medications just based on that search right there. Okay, so let's take a break here from exploring, directly Oracle text inside of our SQL commands area of Apex, and let's explore how we can go about actually implementing this for our end users. We don't want our end users to have to come in here and think about the syntax, think about what this correct syntax is for fuzzy versus soundex versus basic searches, right? We want them to just be able to enter a text field inside of the UI, and it will return all documents with that word inside of the document. So to do that, we're basically going to create a simple filter inside of our table where we'll filter the table based on any user input. And we'll make sure that that user input is refreshed every time it's updated so that you're getting the most up-to-date list of documents based on the user session. So let's go explore how easy that is to build out. If we visit our object browser, or I should say go back into our Oracle text application that we built out, and we're going to take a look at page 5. Page 5 is the report of the patient documents table that was already created. So for this example, I think we can start off with just a basic search. So we'll go into our patient documents query, and we'll look here and we'll say, we're selecting these columns. We're getting the blob, contents of the blob from the document column right there, as well as these few other columns. And we'll just add a simple where clause. So we can add a where clause and use the syntax from the basic search that we used already inside of Oracle, inside of SQL Workshop, I should say. And we'll just use this where clause right here where we talk about MRN, just like that. So the way this works now is if a user is to log into this application, they're going to always be presented with a report that contains the documents that have the word MRN in. In this case, it would be all of them. But we want them to be able to input their own word and substitute it here as a variable. So the first thing we want to do is create a simple region. So we'll just say create region. I'll drag it to the top. And for this, it's just going to be a container. And what we'll do with the container is we will just remove the UI decoration, hide the header. This is going to give it a bit of a cleaner look, but it's just a logical container, so it won't actually display on the front end after the changes we've just made. I will say create a page item. This page item can be called P5 keyword. So this P5 keyword is where the user is actually going to enter the basic word search that they want to filter the documents down with. So once they have entered this word, we want to make sure that inside of our query, instead of referencing MRN, we need to reference P5 keyword. We're also going to use that as a page item to submit. Page item to submit allows the client-side session to be submitted to the session state so that the Oracle text query can then refresh based on the session state. So when you refresh this report, it's going to pull the contents from the session state of P5 keyword and not from the client side. So what that means is that if we submit the page item as we generate this report, we're then going to get the most up-to-date keyword instead of being one keyword behind based on the session state. So let's go ahead and return here. And the other thing we want to do is go ahead and create a dynamic action based on this keyword. And this dynamic action is going to employ some JavaScript. The JavaScript is going to allow us to dynamically refresh that report being the patient document report directly below it, anytime a user enters a new keyword. So we'll say anytime this value of P5 keyword is changed, instead of showing, we can go ahead and refresh a given region. And the region we're going to select is the patient documents table. So if we have everything set up properly here, we can go ahead and explore and see if we can get this working. Let's say run. Originally, you're going to be hit with an error because it's looking to refresh the patient documents table based on a null keyword. So it's throwing an error for you. But if you simply put a word in there, such as test, it's going to return all the documents with the word test in it. And to prove this, we can also use the word MRN, which we know earlier returns all the documents. In order to fix this issue, it's a quick fix inside of Apex. We could just go into our patient documents table and inside of the source for the SQL query, and we can choose to, instead of returning P5 keyword here, we can just add a null value clause where if P5 keyword is blank, we'll go ahead and just choose to return MRN. Again, MRN we know exists within all the documents, so it's going to return them all. So now that we have a null keyword, it's going to search based on MRN, and we're going to get a response of all of them. We can also use the word ABC or the word medical center, and we'll get the respective records displayed right there. And you can download them for viewing right away. So this is a very basic use of Oracle text. So we're just using it to filter down a document, and the document is located in a blob column to the table. But let's go ahead and explore some maybe a more advanced feature of Oracle text, which would be the theme extraction. So theme extraction is going to allow us to generate themes inside of that document. And then we can create some sort of UI here on the front end to allow our end users to easily view the theme of any given document once they've already filtered down their search. So I'm going to go ahead and visit back to the SQL commands tab. And the first thing we want to do in order to build out our themes generation or a themes extraction, we want to go ahead and create a table to store those themes in. So we'll create a table called themes, and we'll have a column for query ID, which will be our number. We'll have a column for the actual theme. and we will have a column for weight. Weight is how we will organize how strongly that theme is found within our respective documents. So weight is basically going to be how we order those documents for the end user. So if we create this table, then we need to go through and loop in the table and run a function based on every record within the documents table. So to do that, we can simply do a for loop or a loop through beginning with the first document in the table. We're going to run the ctxdoc.themes function. And it's going to look through all the records and generate the themes and store it back into the themes table here. And so if we run this, it's going to process that statement. And finally, we can select from our themes table. So if we did like a simple select star themes, we're going to return everything back. You'll see here we have many records that doesn't mean a whole lot for us right now, but if we choose to write a slightly different query, so instead of that one, I'll copy one from here, and we can do a query where we select the title, the file name, the theme, and the weight from the patient documents and the themes table respectively. We'll join them based on the ID of the document and the query ID. And we also want to display only documents with weight over 25 in order to minimize the number of responses. Finally, we want to order by weight, and we can choose descending. So here's a much better view of our themes table where it has a lot of our documents, some of the strongest themes and how they're organized. So for example, a lot of these documents themes revolve around the healthcare facility they visited, the medication they're mentioned to be taking, as well as maybe some of the complaints from the certain patient displayed right here in the query. But again, we want to make sure that we make it easiest for the end user. We want them to be able to access the themes on a certain document without having to come to the back end, write up the query, generate the query, update the document, run a loop through the document indexing it, or running the function based on every record. So in order to do that, we're going to have to get a little bit more complicated inside of Apex. So let's go ahead and return to our page designer. And we'll do a few things. The first thing we need to do is to create a page that's going to store our themes table. So just like we created a page that stored our patient documents table, we'll create a brand new one that stores our themes table. So if we do page, we'll also use a classic report for this. And this one we can just call it document themes. Go ahead and use page 7. And for this, we won't need a form page, but I will choose to display it as a modal dialog. Modal dialog will allow this page to be a pop-up as opposed to redirect within our application. I'm also going to go ahead and choose a source as instead of a table, we'll use a query. And the query is going to select the theme and weight from the patient documents table and the themes table. And we want to join those based on the ID of the document, the ID of the query. And of course, we also would like to join them based on the record that the user selects within the UI. So, and I'll explain this more in just a second, but basically we want it so that the user is able to come in here and select an individual record and be presented with the themes for that record specifically. So in the case of the query we ran here, you're going to get records for all the queries inside or all the record themes inside the database. But if we go back in here, we want to make sure they filter down just based on the record that the user selects. So we're going to store that in something called P7 query ID. This is just going to be a page item inside of our new page that we're creating. So this page item doesn't exist just yet, but I'm going to build it out and I'm going to use this as a reference so that we're joining the selection from the user to the query ID and then the query ID to the ID of the actual document we need to display. And then of course we can use the same weight and order by clauses we were using earlier. So weight and order by weight descending. Check that. Okay, let's go ahead and say create page. And you'll see the two columns that were selected in our query. So you have our theme column and our weight column. We want to create two new page items. So the first one is going to be P7 query ID. So this is going to hold the ID of the document that's selected from the end user. And the other page item we're going to create is going to be used in a similar way. We're going to select the title of the document selected by the end user. What we can do to make this easier for ourselves even is if we copy this P7 title and go here to document themes, instead of just displaying the word document themes, we can use that as a reference to our page item. So whatever the value of this P7 title is, it will be displayed right here in the title of the report itself. We'll just need to make sure that we are showing our header just like that. So this is a modal page. And like I mentioned before, modal pages are simply pop-up pages inside of your Apex app. And we want to make sure that we're accessing this modal page from another page or another application. So the idea here is that we return to page 5, and we're going to create a virtual column. The virtual column is going to serve as a link to this new page. And any row in that virtual column that you click, the ID of the document within that table will be passed to query ID and then to the P7 query ID, which is the page item we created. And it's going to allow us to display the themes for that individual record. So I'm going to go through it step by step, but the first step is to create that virtual column. And the virtual column, we can just call, instead of that, we can just use themes. So this is just going to serve as a column within our report itself. So even if we went to refresh the page right now, you'll see we have a brand new virtual column here, themes, but it's completely blank because there's no content in it. For the content, we actually want to make sure that we're using a link. So we will use a link to link from this column into our new page that was created just a second ago. So let's go ahead and create a link. Let's see here. Link. Seems I've lost it here. Let's see if we can. Oh, I changed it to plain text. Oops. So let me delete that and do that one more time. So let's go ahead here and call this themes, and then we'll use a target here as a link. So we're going to link to page 7, and we're going to go ahead and set a few items. So the first item we're going to set is P7 query ID, and the value is just going to be the ID that the user selects. So when a user selects an ID from our report, it's going to be past the P7 query ID, which is then going to allow us to execute that query we entered early properly. And we'll do the same thing for title. Title. Okay. And we'll say save. Last thing to do is just take out that link text and add in a pencil icon, for example. And let's run this and check it out. So now if we look at our document table, you'll see that you have a pencil icon here under themes that will allow you to view the themes of that document. Looks like we have some cleaning up to do as far as the query ID and the title. We don't actually need to display these, as well as the weight. The weight serves as an ordinal purpose, so we don't actually need to display the weight to our end user. And same thing goes for score. It's general best practice not to display score to the end user because it's not meaningful to them, and it's more serves as a database tool to organize your responses from the database. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and go to page 7. We can go ahead and hide these two items. And of course, we can go ahead and hide weight as well. And now let's give it a look at what it looks like. So that looks a lot cleaner. Again, you see here that we are passing the ID of the document that was selected in order to receive the theme for just that document itself. we're also passing in the title of the document and displaying it here within the header. So that concludes the Oracle text demonstration I want to show you today. I did want to touch on also that if you are interested in Oracle text or you want to explore Oracle text more, you can of course visit your own Apex environments, and inside of the gallery, which we talked about briefly earlier, there is an application called Sample Interactive Grids. It's a one-click download, and if you run that application, you are able to view more about Oracle text under the reporting tab and inside of Oracle text. Note, in order to get Oracle text working, you do need to grant your database user permissions. I believe the permission is ctx_app. But if you were to load this page in your own environment, before it displays properly, it will let you know what permissions you need to grant as well as the index that you need to create. So just keep that in mind. It'll walk you through step-by-step how to get started with Oracle text, as well as how to use Oracle text in your own Apex environment. Again, if you're already familiar with Apex and have been using some of these interactive reports and interactive grids, searches like this do employ Oracle text in order to filter down your documents properly based on spelling errors and things like that. So if you just like that. So that concludes my presentation. I'm going to go ahead and pass to Ali. Ali is going to talk about some of our Code Innovate programs and how you can take a use case similar to this that was brought to us and work on your own use case with some of our Code Innovate engineers.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining today. As Shane said, my name is Ali Visconti. I'm a program manager for our Code Innovate program here at Oracle. And I'm excited to share with you a little bit more about the program and how it can help you jumpstart your cloud journey and tackle some of your business problems you may be facing. Next slide, please, Shane. Thank you. Okay, cool. So to start off with, we do like to compare the Code Innovate program to this Master Builder class here at Legoland. Stay with me, I promise it makes sense. So at Legoland, there's a class, like I said, called Master Builder. And when you walk in, you are given a bag of disassembled Lego pieces. And then at the front of the room, there's a person, the Master Builder, who leads the class. The Master Builder is an expert in Legos. And he's also going to be up there with like a little model of what you are going to be trying to build that day. So to recap, you're in this class, you get a baggie of disassembled Lego pieces, and the Lego master up front, he doesn't exactly tell you all the steps. You're basically given all of the tools that you need to accomplish the goal. So in this picture here, the model they were trying to build that day was a little penguin. So the way it works, they're given these baggies and they have to try to build the penguin on their own. But if they get stuck, they have the Master Builder there to help as well. So that's kind of like our Code Innovate program in a nutshell, except instead of Legos, it would be Oracle Cloud. And then instead of the children here, it would be you and your team. And then instead of a master builder, it'd be an engineer from Oracle helping guide you along the process. Next page, please. Thank you, Shane. Cool. So what exactly is a Code Innovate? It's a 5 half-day online event. And like I said, it jumpstarts your cloud journey. And it's only for 4 hours a day. And it basically gives a hands-on introduction to cloud services. You would meet with one of our engineers from our team. You would discuss basically a use case or the business problem you're trying to solve with Oracle Cloud. And we will help guide you and your team during this 5 half-day event to accomplish that goal or a first pass prototype. Like I said, we're not there necessarily to do the work, but we're here to kind of help guide and help get a first pass prototype of what you're trying to accomplish. So it also facilitates rapid knowledge sharing. Again, it's a little more it's not even a little more, it's definitely more hands-on than just like a webinar or a guided lab or something. So the engineer will be telling you where to click, it's telling you where to go, helping you out on what to do. But you yourself, the engineer, would be doing all the clicking, and which helps build the muscle memory and I myself think it helps makes the knowledge stick a little bit better in your brain, right? Also, like I said, it leverages your use cases. And what we mean by use cases are the business problems or whatever you're trying to tackle. And finally, there's no cost for this event if the minimum requirements are met. So next slide, please, Shane. So the Code Innovate experience, just to recap, you and your team, you would come to us and you bring your use cases, aka your business problems, and we'll work on trying to build through a first pass prototype. Instead of showing you canned demos of like what, for example, Oracle Apex could do or OAC, we would use your use cases to help show you how the product works. Again, it facilitates some rapid knowledge sharing. It's 4 hours a day for 5 days, and you'll be on Zoom or WebEx or whatever your company likes to use, and you're solely focused on accomplishing that goal during those 4 hours. Like I said, the 4 hours, it's for half a day, so you still have half of your day to do your normal job. So you don't have to like let your work slip through the cracks, but then you have the other 4 hours of your workday with just us, the Oracle engineers. And then finally, at the end of the week, hopefully you plan to get a first pass prototype. It's not going to be a completely built out solution, but it helps jumpstart the cloud journey and helps gain knowledge, and it helps get you started on accomplishing that goal. Next slide, Shane. So if you're interested in learning more, please feel free to email us at codeinnovate_us_grp@oracle.com, or if you are very interested, please feel free to leave your emails in the chat below and we'll get back to you. And I think with that, I can hand it back to Tara.
Thanks, Allie, and thanks, Shane, for this fantastic presentation. Just a couple quick things. If you enjoyed today's session, we will be having another cloud coaching session on September 15th, so be on the lookout for that. And we also encourage you to share with us any feedback that you have on today's session or to reach out with any questions. We'll be leaving the Slack channel open as well, so feel free to drop any follow-up questions in there, or if you want to reach out and provide your email as well, please feel free to use that as a way to get in touch as well. So with that, that concludes our slides for today, and it doesn't look like we have any more questions. So thank you again, Shane and Allison. Thank you all for joining us here today, and we hope you have a great rest of your day and to see you again next time.